Hi everyone, welcome to Spring Boot Zero to Hero series. Through this series of videos, we are going to cover the Java Spring Boot concepts in detail, and along with this, we will build a project on e-commerce. So everything will be implemented. You don't have to worry about memorizing the concepts via these videos. You only have to focus writing the code and understanding them in better way. Try to do modifications from your end. At the end you can get this document along with the Java master documentation that covers so many things. So let's first focus on this web part, and then we will be developing the project as well. So let's begin with this. So this way, let me tell you, you will get the document as well. So first, what is the backend development? I hope most of you understand, but in simple terms, you can say that backend development refers to the server side logic, databases, APIs, and the application architecture that powers the web applications, right? It ensures data processing, storage, authentication, and business logic execution. This is around the backend development. Everyone, all of us understand this, right? Now comes how this backend development earlier was done and what is the current scenario. There comes two important aspects of it. One is monolithic architecture and second one is microservices, right? So let's cover the monolithic first, and then we'll jump to the microservices architecture. What is monolithic architecture, right? So monolithic architecture is a traditional way of building applications where all components, that includes the business logic, UI, data access layer, all are combined into a single code base and deployed as one unit, right? There are advantage and disadvantage of using monolithic architecture. The advantage that comes is single code base, the entire application it will have a single deployment unit, right? Components are tightly coupled. Scaling requires duplication of the entire application. This is one of the major problem, I guess. Now, through this, you can also understand what are the major problems with the monolithic architecture, right? So there is scalability issues, slow development and deployment, tightly coupled components, technology lock-in, right? Difficult to use different technologies for different components. So this is one of the major problem with the monolithic architecture. Limited fault isolation, right? A failure in one part can bring down the entire application. This is actually a real difficulty that the monolithic architecture along with others is facing, right? So in order to overcome these issues, we have come up with part of it is the microservices architecture that we are currently using. So what is microservice architecture, right? Microservice architecture is an approach where an application is composed of multiple small independent services that communicate via APIs. Microservices is like for different small tasks, you can have different microservices. So the issues that we were facing is tightly coupled, that gets resolved, plus the improvement. There is no single fault here in the microservices. If one of the services are down, there are techniques that you can apply to overcome this, right? You can handle this. Fault tolerance handling is very easy in microservices, right? So these are the characteristics that microservices brings to your application. The major that includes is better scalability. Individual services can be scaled independently, faster development and deployment, loosely coupled components, technology flexibility, right? Improved fault isolation. So these are the characteristics that microservices brings in. So basically, the issues that we had with the monolithic architecture, that is being resolved via the microservices architecture, right? So very important to understand these things. Apart from this, basic, I mean, I'm also writing these line by line definitions and the points so that you can memorize after watching the videos. You should have this document so that you can understand everything, right? There is no I mean, we are not very much into the things like if you're watching the video, you will remember it for a longer period of time, right? So better to have a document so that before interviews or before any kind of such things, you can just go through the document and you will get complete. understanding again, right? Again, a major differences that comes in is this is theoretical concept, but yeah, the way we have covered is so that it can help you. You can differentiate monolithic and microservices based on the feature, that is code base, single code base, multiple independent services with the microservices, right? So that was the issue. You have a single code base, and here in the microservices you have multiple independent services. So one of the services are not working. You can actually identify and have a fault tolerance. So that is high in the microservices. The deployment entire application is redeployed, services deployed independently, right? Scalability difference, development speed, technology use, right? Fault isolation, failure affects the entire application. I mean, right now you cannot have this kind of an issues in your application, right? Where let's suppose there is a small failure in the application, everything gets crashed, right? You're not able to operate the application. So that kind of issue was there with the monolithic, but with the microservices these issues has been resolved, right? Maintenance and testing so can be tested individually. This is basically a better way. You can test it individually also, right? So less effort is required, requires full application testing. So obviously even for a small thing you have to test the full application. So that is the issue with the monolithic, right? So for these things we have come up with the microservices to come up with the issues with the monolithic, right? That was the important thing to understand through this video. Okay, so we have understand the major differences between monolithic and microservices, how it has evolved from monolithic to microservices, right? Now, a few other things in order to understand the backend development. The programming languages, basic, right? Uh, Java, Kotlin, Python, kind of stuff. Then backend frameworks, we have a Spring Boot, most popular Java backend framework that currently, that is basically today's focus is the Spring Boot only. But there are other as well. You have Express.js, you have Quarks, right? So those kind of stuff. Databases, relational databases, NoSQL databases, these are basically utilized in a heavy way, right? So here basically our focus is just Spring Boot and not covering the databases as such. But I'll at the end of this series I'll try to add the database concepts as well, and we will try to integrate the databases with our application, right? But we will start with the very basic so that you understand, if you're a first time learner, so that you understand everything, right? So API development we have with the REST APIs, right? That we are going to utilize here, but there are other ways also. GraphQL we have gRPC, right? So those things can be used. We are going to cover in depth around the authentication and security, right? JWT and OAuth we are going to cover. Then API gateway, basically what are the benefits of API gateway? Very important concept or the topic for the interviews, right? So we are going to cover this as well. DevOps and infrastructure, you can basically understand. If you are seeing right now the Java jobs, right? They will have all these things combined. They want everything from a single engineer, which is obviously not possible. But yeah, your focus should be on the Spring Boot, and you should master the Spring Boot as such, right? So let's move to the next video. This is end for this video. Actually, this is very first video where we have just discussed the backend development, how it has evolved from the monolithic to microservices, and few other stuffs around it, right? What are the technology and tools that is required?